Well, it's back to Birmingham now on BBC One, and Ross King.
There we are. Come back to that later. Wonder how it finishes up. In just a minute, Anne and Nick kick off the week with Good Morning and their guest, Brookside, Julie's Peasgood. But before that, here's Judi with the lowdown and Pebble Mill. Yeah, sorry, Judi.
You're a bit of a wag, aren't you, first thing in the morning?
Yeah.
Yes. Would you like to know what's on the programme?
I'd love to, Jude.
We've got Leslie Carroll, who's starring in the new Louis Malle film, steamy, sexy film called Damage. It's arty, if you don't mind. It's just the sort of response I'd expect in here.
Sad, but unavoidable.
Kathy Dennis will be singing.
Yes.
And Love Hurts with Zoe Wanamaker. However, none of your wisecracks, thank you.
You never get any wisecracks from me. You know, and he's grunting again. My mum says, isn't it funny when Judi grunts on the television?
People complain, you know.
Exactly. I do apologise. But right now, good morning with Anne Diamond and with Nick Owen.
Morning.
Hi, it's Monday, the first day of the week, the first day of February.
And you'd think on the first day of February it would be safe to forget about Christmas.
Well, you haven't got your Christmas tree down yet, have you?
Actually, we did take it down last weekend.
Christmas cards?
They're not down yet.
They're still up.
Yeah. Well, it takes lots of organisation,
And you're going
doesn't
to find out now what toys you're going to be under pressure to get next Christmas.
Yeah, the manufacturers are already thinking them up. I beg your pardon.
Sorry, complete accident.
Yeah, there's lovely stocking things they're thinking of already. Look at this, you know, variation on the sort of slimy stuff.
Yeah, which reminds me, we've got a doctor spot later, haven't we?
Yeah.
And
so we have.
Let's hear from Jeni Barnett at the Toy Fair at Earl's Court. Jeni.
Hi, good morning, and what a gloriously colourful day it is. And if you've got some pennies, this little thing can go into your garden. It's got a thing and a slide and swings, and I'm surrounded by Noddy and Big Ears and Pinky Punky, I think his name is, and Rat, and we've got lots of little children here who are being terribly good, and lots of grown-ups being very, very bad. They're all covered in splodges and conkers and things. Anyway, we're going to slide into 94 to see the toys that you can be getting. And if my hips allow me, I'm going to go and do a bit of research. So goodbye and see you later. Wish me luck.
Yes, well, there you are then.
Not exactly the Alps, was it?
Anyway, the Toy Fair is showing off at the moment all of the toys that'll be on sale next Christmas, so don't worry, you've got a while
Including
yet.
that one, which is really something else. It's outselling Nintendo
It's
in
one of
Japan.
those computerised things that I can't understand.
The barcode battler, it's called.
Great. Today's phone-in is, should a woman with children go out to work?
Yes, are you waiting to return to work after having a baby, or are your children getting older and you really feel you need to get a job?
It boils down to this: do you feel guilty or not guilty? Linda Kelsey, the editor of She magazine, herself a working mum, is here to take your calls. Ring her now on 021 609 9000.
And what else do we have in store for you today? Well, as Fran from Brookside discovers that the dastardly Barry Grant has snatched her baby, we meet her alter ego, actress Julie Peasgood, 10:40.
Lots of people prefer a big girl, as we find out when Lone Rangers of Love visits the Plump Partners dating agency.
At 11:20, a brand new romantic serial begins when Patrick Reichardt reads Silver Filigree.
So there's all that and much more to come. We'll put the toys away for the moment. So here's a reminder of what's on today's programme. At home with your children today and every day? Do you wish you could go out to work? Or are you dead set against the idea of being a working mum?
Well, the question of whether a woman with children should go out to work causes plenty of conflict, guilt, exhaustion, and what other people think being only part of it. Well, Anne's a working mum here, my wife works, and several of the Good Morning team are mothers with full-time jobs. And so is Linda Kelsey, who's editor of She magazine. Hello, Linda.
Hello. Why, in this sort of 20th century, when we all know we've got to be liberated and we deserve our own lives as well as giving to others, why do we still feel consumed by guilt?
Well, I think that the media actually conspires to make us feel consumed by guilt, and I think it's still fairly new for this generation of women. But the fact is that more than 60% of women with dependent children now do some sort of work outside the home. And I think it's time we all stopped talking about working mothers and started talking about working parents, because nobody actually ever turns around to a man and says, "You're a working father, don't you feel dreadfully guilty?"
But they've never been made to feel guilty, have they? They've always been, I mean, their traditional part in the family is to go out and earn the bread. So they haven't got the guilt problem, really, like we have in the back of our minds all the time.
That's true, but I think we have to look at the reality of life today and say that we're doing what is necessary. The majority of women certainly don't go out to work because they love their jobs, because they're selfishly pursuing their high-powered careers. The majority of women work today because they need the extra income that they can bring in by working outside the home. Most women today are getting married rather later and they're having their children rather later. So probably the couple have got a mortgage, which is a very high mortgage on a house, and then along come the kids, the extra cost of having a child as well. And it's just not possible for the woman to give up the work, or if she gives up her work, then maybe they have to sell their home, move to a smaller place, and then they're not giving their children what they want to give that child in terms of a
So from the child's
home.
point of view, how do you reconcile it with the fact that a report I think has just come out saying that it really is far better for the child if the mother is at home with him or her for the first 3 years?
Well, I could cite you at least a dozen recent reports that actually show quite the opposite. I mean, it's never really been researched on a major scale. And I think that providing you have loving parents and a child can latch on very early to the idea that, you know, mummy goes out for a few hours each day, but as long as that child has the security of knowing that mummy will be there in the evening, at weekends, I think that they do very well indeed. And I've observed the children of working mums at 3 or 4 years of age, and they seem to me to be very confident, very secure, affectionate, outgoing, and
I was going to say
certainly
the outgoing factor is probably quite a noticeable one, isn't it? That they're used to meeting lots of different people, and
yes,
that's actually good for them.
If they go to a nursery school, for example, they're used to mixing with other kids, and they have a sort of independence about them, which I think is absolutely fine. What's vital, of course, is that the childcare that they're getting, whether it's in the home or at some sort of nursery, is good childcare, and that there's some sort of continuity as well.
Because that's the next main question, isn't it? If a woman chooses or has to go out to work and is comfortable with that and can cope psychologically with it, what then does she have to do about childcare? I mean, you can't always find a job that fits in with the child's nursery hours, so you've got to have decent childcare, and we're not very well off in this country for that, are we?
No, we certainly lag far behind the rest of Europe in state-provided care. I don't personally think it should be all up to the state. I think it's everybody's responsibility. I think it's local authorities, and I think it's employers as well, who should all be working towards finding a solution, because on the one hand, women are being madly wooed back into the workplace. Nobody's saying we don't need these women. They're saying we want women. They've been trained for a long time. They have lots of experience. We want them to come back to their jobs, but they're doing very little to help.
Yeah, I mean,
in
there's no
terms
tax
of
concessions,
childcare.
are there? You have to pay for childcare out of your taxed income.
You do indeed, but there are certain improvements that are coming along. For example, childcare vouchers, which an employer can provide free of tax to the company. So that certainly is a step forward. There are government schemes now for after schools clubs and things like that. A £45 million grant has just been given for setting up these after schools clubs, because people have, I think up until now, been focusing very much on the business of very young children. But in fact, I think it gets even more difficult, the care, as the kids get older. So there are some improvements, but we have a long way to go.
How do you cope, personally? You've got a little boy, haven't you?
Yes, I think I just about manage like everybody else. Sometimes I feel torn. I wouldn't say I ever feel guilty. I've had live-in childcare up until now. And one thing that's very much struck me is that with changes of carers, I've been very concerned that perhaps Thomas would feel very insecure and uncertain. But he seems to adapt to the new carer very, very well indeed. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier, that he has the security of knowing that his parents are going to be there at the end of the day, and we provide the continuity.
So
it seems fine to me.
You don't have a guilt problem?
I wrestled with that very early on, and I thought if ever the guilt gets the better of me, I'm just going to have to give up work and find a different way to survive. But although, as I say, I feel torn sometimes, and there are times when I'd much rather be with him than at the office, no, I don't feel guilty anymore.
Well, do you feel guilty? Let us know. And if you do feel guilty, how do you cope with it? Or do you cope with it? Do you need some help to cope with it? Ring us on our usual hotline number. That's 021 609 9000. 021 609 9000. And you'll be able to talk to Linda Kelsey later on in the programme. Thanks, Linda.
Now, millions of Brookside fans will agree that Fran Pearson was a fool to get mixed up with that rotter, Barry Grant. But she's so smitten with her baby Stephen, it seems that together with Terry, she's at last finding true happiness. Sounds a bit like one of our romantic serials, doesn't it?
Yes, but it all changed on Friday night's episode when, after leaving Stephen with a babysitter for the first time for an evening out with Terry, Fran returned to find disaster.
Oh, God. Stephen, he's not here.
Where's Tracy?
He's gone. Stephen's gone.
You're talking about Tracy. Will have taken him somewhere, won't she? She'll have left him, no?
I'm ringing the police. Get off the line!
All right, Fran. Just stay calm, will you? Stephen's all right.
What have you done with him? Don't hang up, Barry. Barry, please.
Enjoy the film, did you?
Barry, please.
Sorry about this, but Tracy had to leave. She thought Stephen would be in safe hands. Look, Barry, I'm going to put the phone down now, right? And then I'm going to ring the police.
Please don't.
Do that, and you'll never see Stephen again. You won't see either of us again. All right?
Oh, Julie, it's all very traumatic.
It is rather, Nick, it is.
What are you going to do to sort it out?
Well, it gets even more traumatic this week, actually, and there
You're not
isn't...
going to ring the police, I suppose, are you? Because that would make things too simple.
She daren't ring the police, actually, because she knows Barry of old, and when he makes a threat, he certainly means what he says.
Do you remotely sort of identify with the situation as a mum yourself?
Gladly, no. I mean, not the situation she is in at this minute. But I identify with her vulnerability and the fact that she wants at all costs to protect Stephen. You know, you do feel inevitably very vulnerable when you've just had a baby, especially when you're sort of a first-time single mother. And
Trying to get out for the first time.
That's right, and I think that Terry is her only ally and friend, really. And Barry's always had a hold over Terry as well.
Mind you, I feel a bit sorry for Barry not getting access. I think that's a bit naughty, isn't it?
Well, yes.
If he was a good sort, he would have got access, wouldn't he?
Absolutely. I mean,
is that right?
he wanted her to abort the child initially.
Yes.
Then she pleaded with him for maintenance. I mean, not even sort of long term, but just something to get her through. Not only did he refuse that, he took her to a beach when she was pregnant before the shootout.
And punched her up.
And punched her up. And then he's a murderer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Do you think he should get access to you?
Would you let your son have
it?
it?
It was a good decision. A very good decision, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What I was going to say, how difficult is it working with a baby? I mean, because they're not going to do what they're told, are they?
Actually, we had two babies playing Stephen, and they were both remarkably good. I mean, they don't do what they're told because, of course, they can't understand, but the mum is always present. And for me, it just made me incredibly broody. I mean, I think it's the smell of the back of their necks.
Oh, yes. Because you've got an older daughter, haven't you?
I've got a daughter who's nearly 12, so when she was, it's a long time
so
since
it started you thinking, has it?
I'm afraid I'm practising rather hard.
Oh, really?
Really? Oh, congratulations.
Should we follow this line of inquiry or not?
I don't know whether you can any further.
No, so you'd have been interested in what we're talking about, working mums just now.
Sorry. Yes, I was very interested.
Has that been difficult for you?
When Kate was very little, I managed to stay with her for about the first 2 years, and that was both a combination of not wanting to work and also not getting offered anything so wonderful that I felt, you know, I wanted to do it. I think I did a film when she was about 8 months for about 1 month. But I've been very lucky. I mean, I had my mum who would always come down and look after her. And also I've managed to keep 3 babysitters who've been with us for the last 6 years. So Kate's always had a constant, but I do recognise that I've been very lucky.
What about the guilt factor? Have you ever felt that when you've been away for a long time?
Yes and no, but I've always made choices that I've never been away for a long time. I've not wanted to, and Kate's also started doing things herself.
I saw Kate in Drop the Dead Donkey.
Drop the Dead Donkey.
Yes.
I was so proud. I was on Valium backstage.
Does she want to be an actress, you know, forever and ever?
She didn't before that, but they were so sort of lovely to her. I think she may.
Because she was the little girl who won the chance to read the news. Jim will fix it.
She played a very obnoxious little 12-year-old.
She was actually. She played it very
She's
effectively.
She's not like that in
Mind you, they're all
real
obnoxious
life.
in that programme, aren't they? It's a wonderful programme.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So she's got the bug now, has she?
I think she may have the bug, and she's but she's seen, you know, sort of me, and the fact that it's not all glamorous, the fact that it's a lot of hard work, and that it's a team effort. That's been one of the best things, that it relies on everybody, you know, and the sort of cohesion.
Julie, we'll talk again in a moment.
Great.
Thanks very much. We're going to take a natural break now, so keep watching. When we return, the latest medical news from Dr. Mark Porter.
Take 12 ounces of pasta quills. Pour into salted water and boil until tender. Meanwhile, finely chop 1 medium onion, crush 2 garlic cloves, and fry in a little oil until soft. Pour in a 14-ounce can of chopped tomatoes and add a squeeze of tomato puree. Next, quarter half a dozen pitted black olives and stir in. Take a fresh oregano leaf, chop finely, and add to the pan, simmering gently for 5 minutes. Now, drain the pasta and toss well in the tomato mixture. Flake an 8-ounce tin of tuna in oil and stir in. Transfer all the ingredients into a flame-proof dish and sprinkle over grated cheddar cheese and breadcrumbs. Finally, grill for about 10 minutes until the pasta is heated through and the cheese is bubbling. Delicious with plain green salad. Tuna with pasta quills for 4 costs £2.50 and has 450 calories per serving.
During the Second World War, 16,544 pigeons were secretly dropped by parachute behind enemy lines. And in their message carriers was a questionnaire. It asked details about such things as troop movement, artillery stores, and hidden runways. And if the pigeon landed in friendly hands, it was sent back with this vital information. Pigeons were used because they were cheap, silent, and readily available, and Germans were paid a reward for every pigeon they shot down. The most famous of all war pigeons was G.I. Joe. He won more awards, or Dickie medals as they were called, for bravery than any other animal in history. You could say he was the greatest bomber of all time.
Monday night on BBC One at 8, performance and pure theatre.
Oh, I remember one night after closing time. We did the Barber of Seville in the snug.
I bet he wished he'd supped up and gone home.
Round 2 and Punch Drunk at 8:30, pure Queensberry.
Get a thumb ready.
One in the eye, 2 on the telly tonight on BBC One.
Hello again. Now Dr. Mark Porter is here with his weekly roundup of the latest medical news. And we're starting with hepatitis B.
Yes,
that's right, because of that, the case in the newspapers about
the doctor in Stafford, isn't it?
That's right. Evidently, a lady who had a caesarean had an operation by one of the obstetric and gynecological staff up there and actually contracted hepatitis B from the doctor. So they've offered 1,000 women who've also been operated on by this doctor, presumably tests to try and find out whether anybody else has been infected.
Couldn't that cause a bit of a panic?
Yes, I mean, I think the chances are very, very slim, but it's something that's been brewing in the medical profession for a while now, because obviously doctors are prone to catch diseases from other places as well as from patients, and hepatitis B is a blood-borne disease, but you can also catch it from all sorts of body fluids. It's far more contagious than something like AIDS, for instance.
So as well as the fact that a patient may have contracted it from the doctor, doctor in the first hand may have contracted it from one of his patients?
Very likely. I mean, you have to remember that as a surgeon, probably 10% of all operations, the gloves are pierced by needles or by instruments, and the doctor gets what we call a needle stick injury. So it's a very high chance that you actually get contaminated as a doctor, and to that extent, surgeons tend to be vaccinated.
I was going to say, sure, they can be vaccinated against that.
There is a vaccine. It's very expensive. It's only been out for about the last 4 or 5 years. I'm vaccinated, and I think most doctors are now. Obviously, this doctor wasn't vaccinated or had contracted the disease before he was vaccinated. But I think they'll be pushing now in light of this.
Certainly all surgeons should be.
Yeah, I think in light of this as well, I mean, certainly in that particular hospital, that's the way local rules apply. They'll say everybody will have to have a screen to check.
Now, talking about vaccines, there's a new one that could prevent some forms of cancer.
Yes, in fact, there's an interesting article on the Times on it yesterday. This has been a bit of a hype, really. I've got it written down here what the Cancer Research Campaign actually said, that this is the first anti-cancer vaccine ready for UK trials. To put that into perspective, what they've actually found is a vaccine against something called the Epstein-Barr virus, which is the virus that causes glandular fever. But it's associated with lymphoma, a type of cancer of the glands, and it's also associated in China with about 50,000 deaths a year from a type of nasal cancer, cancer of the nose.
Why in China particularly?
I don't know, it's just something that occurs locally. In fact, in Africa, it also causes another strange condition called Burkitt's lymphoma.
It's associated here, isn't it, with Hodgkin's?
That's right, Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of cancer of the glands, of the lymph glands. So what they've said is, well, they think that the Epstein-Barr virus is linked with all of these, so if we can produce a vaccine against the virus, we can then vaccinate against cancer. So it's a good idea, but it's definitely not a cure for cancer, and it'll probably be 30, maybe 50 years before we know whether this is working or not.
Really? That long?
Well, I mean, the cancer in China, for instance, doesn't occur until in people who are over 50. So you'd have to wait until they'd all been vaccinated to see whether they got it or not. So don't hold your hopes up too high. This is a breakthrough, but not a massive one.
Now, I gather the government have issued guidelines for who should have cholesterol testing.
Yes, cholesterol testing being the buzzword of the 90s, as we're all aware. And the big problem is people have been coming to their GPs saying, should I have the test, should I not have the test? And what the government have actually said now is that anybody who has a relative who's had a heart attack under the age of 50, first-degree relative, i.e. mum, dad, sister or brother, should have a test. Anyone themselves who's had a heart attack under the age of 65, anyone who's a diabetic, or anyone who has one of the following 2 risk factors, and that's smoking, high blood pressure, being overweight, and lack of exercise. I think probably the last category will catch a lot of UK citizens. But
we're going to give Nick one, are we?
Yeah, we can. You can have the test done 2 ways. It can either be done by your general practitioner where it's free, or if you like, you can pick up one of these little home testing.
I'll be your nurse.
If you can be nurse for a while, I'll just pinch that and that. You can have your finger there. These are...
Do I need tissue or something?
You would have a bit of tissue.
Is this a GP testing kit or a home?
Shouldn't you be wearing a mask for this?
No.
Right.
This is just a...
Don't worry, if you feel faint, I've got plenty of tea on standby.
And this is just...
But you can actually do this to yourself?
You can actually do this to yourself, and if we just... This is going to be a sharp pain. OK, now if you just squeeze that, see if we can get some blood out of that.
Not much, is there? I've got it mostly in my left hand today.
You turn your finger upside down and see if you can just squeeze it into that little thing over there.
Right.
This is going to be another one of our live demonstrations. I can feel it coming.
And that goes into that little there?
That goes into that little thing there.
Yeah, I've got some in there. Is that right?
Yeah, no, you need to fill it right up. But
do I?
Basically what we do is we pop...
Keep going.
It's always complaining.
Pump your leg or something.
Well, if you pump my leg...
That's right, if we can get it out.
There's not much here.
These are about 6 to 8 pounds for the different kits. They take about 15 minutes to get the result. Now,
so we'll be able to give Nick his result in about 15 minutes' time.
And what do we want it to do or not want to do?
No, keep trying to get blood in.
We need to...
Just concentrate.
And you can pick these up from your local chemist. Now, if they're high, if you find you have a high reading on that, pop along to your doctor and have a proper test, because as you can see, they're not that easy to use, and if you don't use them properly, if we take more than 2 or 3 minutes to fill them up, then the results
Mark, we'll come back to that later. Thanks a lot.
Well, thanks very much, Mark, and we'll come back to you a bit later on. And Mark's going to be back with us on Thursday, his usual day, to take your calls on osteoporosis, the bone-thinning disease, which is reckoned to be present to some extent in every single woman over 65. That's a lot to look forward to. Now, for the moment, though, let me tell you a happy tale about a lady named Abigail. How are you getting on?
Well, there's not much coming out.
Oh, dear. This lady, never mind about that. This lady's called Abigail. She's divorced, middle-aged, And self-admittedly, she's plump, and she thought she'd check out some dating agencies. Waste of time, says Abigail. They weren't interested in someone her size. But then, as you'll see in today's Lone Rangers of Love, she did in the end strike gold.
Society can be cruel and confusing. We're told how to look by a bombardment of role models and ads that surround us, all geared to the young, the beautiful and the thin. So what chance for the generously proportioned in the love stakes against this barrage of the body beautiful? Plump Partners is an agency designed to help outsized personalities feel comfortable about themselves. Our Lone Ranger this week is 39-year-old Abigail. She's divorced, a legal secretary, and lives at home with her parents and 17-year-old son. Having waited for him to grow up, she's now chosen Plump Partners to meet her match. Why Plump Partners?
Well, I had looked at other agencies.
Yeah.
And I was thinking more about sort of cost-wise, that sort of thing. And being a single parent. And obviously because I'm plump, that's what sort of attracted me to the Plump Partners.
7 years ago, from her home in Wales, Sandy Milligan founded Plump Partners.
I'm a twice divorced lady. I was a single parent. I'm a single parent. I have a 12-year-old daughter. I used to be in dispensing, pharmacy technician. Had no thoughts of, shall I set up a dating agency? It really was a personal thing. But I had a very unhappy sort of past. Obviously, 2 failed marriages behind you, lots of feeling made to feel bad about yourself because of your size through one reason or another, brings you to a phase in your life where you wonder if there's much point in carrying on.
Abigail paid £42 for 6 months membership, though fees are based on a sliding scale according to income.
I really set the agency up for myself. I mean, other people as well, but I did want to find a partner. That was why I started Plump Partners. And I met Brian just over 2 years ago when I looked at his membership form, liked the look of it, and got in touch with him and snaffled him up. Nobody else had a chance, I'm afraid.
70 couples across the country have met through Plump Partners. A date set up by the agency led to wedding bells for Julie and Russell.
I was early.
So that put me into a tiz.
In fact, I was half hour early actually, but an hour early in reality, because I was supposed to be there at 8. I was outside at 7, and I killed half an hour.
And it wasn't like he sounded, and so I was a bit taken aback and got myself ready. And I was in a tiz anyway because he was early and I was late, and we went out to Hampstead for the evening for drinks and a meal. And then I remembered what a nice man he was and what great fun he is, and you know, everything that I'd liked about him on the telephone, and I really warmed to him. And well, that's when it was love at second sight, I suppose.
Yummy, 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 I got love in my tummy.
But does all this meet with the approval of agony aunt Claire Rayner, who speaks with some inside information?
This idea that you need sort of special treatment if you're overweight, why put people like that in a box? I'm plump. And I've got a thinnish husband. Big deal. I mean, I don't see why you've got to always match yourself. So I'm not absolutely sure that that's a necessary one. If it's that important to you to be exactly the same as your partner, well, all right. But I wouldn't put that one too high on the list, personally.
We don't discriminate against any size, but nobody that joins must be going to discriminate against any size. At least 2/3 of the gents are not plump themselves. Some people have had my advert, or whatever, wherever they've seen it, for months, and before they can actually get in touch. And many times I answer my phone and people put it down. And it's people that just can get as far as dialing the number but can't speak to me.
But did it work for Christine?
Well, I've met 2 people, actually. One is rather special. The other one I consider Mel as a friend, if you know what I mean. And it's gone very well.
Where's the relationship going to now?
I'd like for it to go a lot further, obviously. Either to marriage or settling down some way. You know, that's where I'd like to see it end.
What's made Plump Partners work for you, Abigail?
It's given me a chance where I didn't have a chance before, to meet somebody who likes a plump person. And for that I'm very grateful.
So another success for one of our Lone Rangers of love. Here's Katrina, who's looking for love on the telephone, our next Lone Ranger of love.
Love is all you need.
Good. Good stuff, isn't it? You can find details of the introduction agencies in this series and of the background to all our features, incidentally, in the latest New Look edition of our Good Morning newsletter. There you are. Just send a stamped addressed envelope to Good Morning, PO Box 9000, Birmingham B11NA, and mark the envelope Newsletter. We've been talking about working mums and whether they should or should not feel guilty, or whether they do or do not feel guilty. We've had a call from Suzanne in High Wycombe, dreaded going back to work and felt racked with guilt, but she loves it now, has a childminder, enjoys her freedom. So that's a positive note, isn't it?
It all depends who you're leaving your child with, I think, whether you feel secure about it. It's almost 11 o'clock, time for the news, and after that, a Scottish gamekeeper continues the centuries-old tradition in our picturesque series, Country Faces.
A new love story, a new dilemma, this time for Jeni in our Library of Romance.
And Mr. Fix-It, Will Hanrahan, has the answer to some of your practical problems.
But now it's 11 o'clock, time for the news. Read today by Chris Lowe. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning. The pound has rallied on the London markets after hitting a record low in Tokyo overnight. It dropped to 235.50 after speculation of further interest rate cuts and the devaluation of the Irish punt, but is now trading at 237.30. In Brussels, the Irish Foreign Minister Dick Spring has questioned the EC's willingness to defend the European monetary system after his government was forced to devalue the punt by 10% on Saturday.
The foreign exchanges in London have so far reacted calmly to the latest crisis in the exchange rate mechanism. The pound has recovered some of its overnight steep fall, and there's been little movement among the ERM member currencies following the devaluation of the Irish punt. Share prices in London have gone up sharply, amid hopes that a lower pound will boost Britain's exports. The French Finance Minister Michel Sapin has said the franc can survive any speculation against it, but currency dealers say France may have to raise interest rates. The Irish Foreign Minister Dick Spring has said concerted actions now needed to stop the ERM currencies being picked off one by one.
A hospital in Staffordshire is offering hepatitis B tests to 1,000 patients after a woman apparently contracted the disease from a surgeon carrying the virus. The surgeon involved has been performing gynecological operations at the Stafford District General Hospital for 2 years. The hospital says the risk of widespread infection is minimal. 60% of NHS trust hospitals say they're having to make cutbacks between now and April to stay within their budgets. The Health Secretary, Virginia Bottomley, says new guidelines will be issued to help prevent hospitals running out of cash before the end of the financial year.
Reports of ward closures and cancelled operations have been seized upon by the British Medical Association and opposition MPs as evidence of the worst hospital crisis in 30 years. The BBC contacted all 91 trusts providing acute and specialist medical services. Although the survey reveals that trust hospitals are cancelling non-urgent operations, some, like Ealing, had planned to complete their contracts for this kind of surgery well before the end of the financial year. And although ward closures are widespread, trusts say they are treating more patients than ever before, and waiting lists are being reduced.
England are on the verge of defeat in the first test in Calcutta. When the fourth day's play ended just a few moments ago, India were 36 for no wicket, needing only 43 more runs to win.
England's chances rested largely on Mike Gatting's shoulders, and his confident start gave some cause for optimism. This 4 brought up his 50. But when he was on 81, a mistimed sweep sent the ball into his stumps and Gatting back to the pavilion. Without a run being added, Graham Hick was caught LBW and swift defeat began to look possible. But the England tail showed some staying power, and runs from Ian Salisbury and others meant India had to bat again. But they needed only 79 to win, and their openers warmed to the task. Tomorrow's action will be little more than a formality.
That's it. More news at midday.
Good morning. The news in the West. Gloucestershire police have named a man who was stabbed to death at a house at Quedgeley near Gloucester over the weekend. He was Paul Kempster, who was 48 and from Swindon. Detectives are still waiting to question a man who's being treated at Gloucestershire Royal Hospital. A 25-year-old man is appearing before magistrates in Somerset charged with rape. The man, who's from Eastville in Bristol, was questioned by Bath police over the weekend in connection with the alleged rape of a 28-year-old woman from Colford near Frome on Friday. Taunton Deane Council says it's introducing a scheme to make a block of flats safer after a 4-year-old boy died in a fire at the weekend. The council says it'll pay for the cost of fitting smoke alarms from April. Charlie Masters died in the fire at a flat in Taunton early on Saturday. A fire officer has said his life might have been saved if there had been a smoke alarm. Well, those are the main stories in the West. Finally, let's take a look at the weather. It'll be mostly dry with a little drizzle in places this morning. Rather cloudy, but there'll be some bright or sunny spells. The maximum temperature 7 degrees Celsius, that's 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Now back to Good Morning with Anne and Nick.
Hello again, time for the weather forecast with Michael Fish. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning to you.
I tell you what, there's crocuses rising up all over the place. Spring's here already.
I know, I hope they're not going to be in for a nasty shock because we haven't actually got to the coldest time of the year on average yet. That's usually the sort of first week or two of February, but certainly my garden's beautifully in bloom, crocuses everywhere, and even some of the trees are beginning to come out into bud. So, as I say, let's hope they don't get a nasty shock. Now, it's a north-south split today, rather as we've had over the weekend, with the north having a good deal of sunshine, the south rather more in the way of cloud. But actually, having said that, already in many southeastern parts of the country, that cloud is thinned and broken. It looked quite bright outside your window, for instance. But further to the north, the cloud is thicker. It's a bit grey and gloomy. And we are going to find this cloud edging slowly northwards during the rest of the day. So eventually, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, and the west of Scotland tend to cloud over. But the cloud's still fairly thin in places, allowing a little bit of brightness. Best of the sunshine throughout the day, eastern Scotland, and a fair bit of sunshine in southeast England, through the Midlands, into central southern England, the Channel Islands as well. Now, it is quite breezy in that northern part of Scotland. The wind there not far off gale force. And the winds further south, although they're lighter, they are drifting in off the continent, and the continent's been fairly chilly recently. So I think those temperatures will have a struggle, up to about 5 degrees or so in the south, whereas a reasonably mild 7 or 8 or so in the north. Now, to begin with this evening, there will be some good breaks in the cloud, especially in eastern areas, and that means to say at the first part of the night could, just here and there, be a touch of frost. But later on in the night, we're going to find the cloud thickening across from the west, a few spots of drizzle near to those western coasts and hills, rather more in the way of rain in that northwestern corner of Scotland. So I think by the end of the night, we will find temperatures back up above freezing, and that's all for now.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. Annie's just coming to join me. You okay, dear?
I'm fine, thank you very much.
Here am I battling on, even with a plaster on my finger, after that deep penetrating wound put in by the doctor earlier.
Yeah, well, and we don't know what your result of your test is yet, do we?
Not yet, no, but he's going around sort of wiping his brow, and he's just given me the phone number of the Samaritans.
It's a low-fat diet for you.
Beautiful. I couldn't face it. Thank you for your calls.
Peel the skin off the chicken, you will.
I must just say hello to Sarah from West Wickham. She says she's been up all night with her 2-year-old Hannah, who's ill. So can Anne and Nick say hello? Hello, Sarah. Sorry to hear that Hannah hasn't been well. We know what it's like being up all night with a youngster. Not the easiest thing in the world. June from Nottingham, 63, and fed up with ageism. When she applies for a job, she has the experience, but her age always counts against her, she says. Any chance of an item on this, she says? Well, I'm sure there might be.
Yeah, ageism's very real, isn't it? We were talking about working mums earlier, and whether or not you should feel guilty, or whether or not you do feel guilty, really, about going out to work if you've got children, and whether a woman's place is in the home, particularly in the first couple of years of a baby's life. Mrs. Weller from Suffolk says she can't see the point in having children if mothers are going to palm them off to someone else at the first opportunity.
Alison from Sheffield says it's hurtful when people say that people should only have children if they're prepared to stay at home. Some people can't afford that liberty. Alison is a nurse. And Diane from Leeds says most young mothers have to work because of financial necessity. And this is an interesting one. Phil from St Anne says working dads who are single parents have the same problems. He has to take time off work to look after his children.
Margaret from Liverpool says that the feelings of guilt which developed because you believe you are not there when your children need you don't go away even when you're a grandmother. I'm a grandmother now, she says. I work and I don't feel that I can give enough time to my children. That's interesting that it lasts that long.
It's certainly provoked an enormous amount of cause, and it is a subject of our phone-in later. Marianne from Sheffield has been a working mum, but is now at home following the birth of her second child. She used to feel guilty, she says, with her first baby because she missed out on all the changes and developments during those first few years. Now she's staying at home, the guilt has gone. Thanks, Marianne.
Gail from London wants to know what sort of questions to ask a childminder when you're interviewing them. That's a very good subject.
Isn't it?
Yeah. I always want to know, I always think it's a good idea to find out about their background and what their mums and dads are like, and how many brothers and sisters they've got, and what sort of family they come from, whether there's a sense of responsibility there. But it's a very good question, and we'll make sure that Linda Kelsey answers your point a bit later on in our phone-in.
Monica from North Yorkshire, this is an interesting one as well, thinks that it's more important for teenagers to have someone to come home to because of the amount of trouble they can find themselves in. Obviously, they've got a lot of questions to ask, you know, because they are that much older. So that is a very good point. It seems to be there are so many different points of view, but it's all down to circumstances, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And money.
Carol from London would willingly use a work creche, but feels that most employers have a negative attitude towards such provision. She admits that looking after her 16-month-old can be very boring, and that's another thing, isn't it? A lot of mums just find they can't stand it up here to be stuck at home all day.
Some people take to it absolutely and don't mind sort of crawling around the floor and washing nappies all day. Some people really don't. I mean, they love it, and other people find it an absolute crushing bore. I think everybody's an individual, but the important thing is choice. Not all, you know, not everybody can afford choice. Here's a lovely photograph in the frame today.
That is beautiful, isn't it?
It's absolutely gorgeous. Look at that. It was sent to us by Mrs. B. Durham from Bradford in Yorkshire, and it shows her 5-year-old granddaughter, Sarah, in a field full of poppies. And Mrs. Durham points out that poppies are there to make us remember those who died. She said, but seeing her little granddaughter in amongst the poppies makes you feel that they did die for something. Isn't that lovely? That's beautiful. Thank you.
Now, so many of you have written in to say how much you enjoy our Country Faces series, in which we bring you people and places where time often appears to stand still.
And if that's you, you're going to love today's story of Sandy the gamekeeper, who tends an estate in the Scottish hills in the time-honoured tradition.
I was born on the estate, and I've never been off it from childhood till the present day. I started working in the estate when I was 15-year-old, just as an odd job boy, doing firewood and cutting firewood and things like that. And then I gradually went on to the underkeeper, and then become the head keeper. Come on, lass. Come on, Ann. Come on. Trace. Come on, Ann. Come on, Ann. Come on, Ann. Come on.